Hey, it's Art. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are going to be discussing guitar spring reverbs. Now, not necessarily what might come out of my Orange Crush 35 RT right here, even though this is not a real spring, it's a digital emulation. Nonetheless, we are going to be discussing advanced guitar spring reverb returns inside our digital audio workstation and how they can give us more flexibility and control over the sound of our reverbs, particularly in the case of guitars and spring reverbs. So without further ado, let's hop into the digital audio workstation and get started. All right, here we are inside of Logic Pro. I put away the amp, I picked up my guitar, and we are ready to go. So the guitar is plugged directly into my interface. The amp is nowhere to be found in the signal chain, and we're going to be focusing primarily on the usage of the spring reverb by Softtube. I'll leave a link to that in the description box down below, along with any other third-party plugins we end up using in this training. So spring reverbs have been fairly common in guitar amplifiers since the 60s, helping to shape the sound of electric guitar over decades of use. As the name would suggest, a spring reverb is a mechanical type of reverb, and while there's a lot of emulations, a real spring reverb has an actual metal spring, and there's going to be an input transducer on one side that causes the spring to vibrate according to the audio signal being sent to the reverb, and then there's going to be an output transducer on the other side of the spring that's effectively going to capture the vibrations of the spring, which make a reverberant sound. And while you don't absolutely need to use spring reverb on guitar, there is a lot of historic context for the use of spring reverb with guitar, so it might be a good choice for you. Of course, as we discussed, you can always dial it in if your guitar amplifier has it and you're actually miking up your guitar for recording, or you can utilize pedals that will often emulate the sound of spring reverb, or some may even have a spring in them. But I think that we can get a lot more control and advanced techniques out of actually utilizing plugins inside our digital audio workstation in an effects return setup, which is what we are going to be discussing today. Now, before we get into it, I've written about this music production technique and 99 of my other favorite music production techniques in a series of PDFs. If you'd like to get those for free, the link will be the first one in the description box down below. You can sign up to my newsletter and I'll send those to you right away. But let's move on. I will turn up the volume knob in my guitar. And as I said, I have the guitar running straight into my interface. So this is a completely dry guitar. And you see that I'm sending it to bus 1. Bus 1 comes in here, sending through the spring reverb. And then I have this correlation meter right here just to show that the spring reverb is in mono. So without the reverb, without actually sending to the reverb, just a very basic sound. It's just whatever's coming out of the pickups and going through the preamps in my audio interface is what we're hearing. And even just sending a completely dry, no tone added guitar signal to a spring reverb, we can already get a nice sound out of it. And that's without dialing in too much. I have the mix set all the way to the wet because it is an effects return. I have the bass and treble adjusted just a little bit. In this plugin, we can choose between the number of springs. So one spring is going to sound very much like a spring, really bouncy. And then if we add more springs, it's going to make the sound a bit more diffuse and less springy, for lack of a better term. We can adjust the virtual tension of the spring. So the higher the tension, the more the spring is going to resist vibration. And so that's going to change the sound and the decay of the reverb versus having something really loose. A little bit longer tail. And then there's a really cool addition to the spring reverb by Softtube. It's this shake option right here. If you actually had a spring reverb in, say, a guitar amplifier, the guitar amplifier was on, you just punch the top of it, it would actually vibrate the spring mechanically, and it would cause an output from the amplifier so long as the reverb was turned on, and we can get a similar effect here. Did not realize that was going to clip, but just a cool addition to this. Not really all that useful except for special effects, but nice touch. And so in this case, we have complete independent control over the reverb and the guitar feeding into the reverb. Whereas if we were to record a guitar, mic up a cabinet that had reverb applied to the signal coming out of the cabinet, then we would have the reverb baked into the signal. We would kind of have to work with what we had. In this setup, we again have independent control over the reverb. I can adjust all of these settings after the fact, even if I've recorded something on the guitar. And I can also adjust the level so that I can mix it to my heart's content. So once again, increase the treble, turn down the bass. We can also automate the tension, get a cool effect there. A little bit of pitch shifting, and a whole bunch of cool stuff within the context of the mix. So one thing I really like doing with my reverbs especially is to add a bit of EQ. Typically I'll insert this after the reverb. This is just a great way to clean up especially the quote-unquote muddiness range in the low mids. So typically around 200. Now there's not a whole lot of that energy in the guitar that we have to be concerned about, especially not in a solo guitar, but in a denser mix where frequency masking will become an issue, especially again in this muddiness range. We can often EQ our reverbs in general, not just our spring reverbs for our guitars, just to help clean things up and get a little bit more clarity out of the mix. I'll bring up a high pass filter here as well. We can, in addition to this, pan to the same side or the opposite side. So if I was just to quickly pan my guitar all the way to the left and the spring reverb all the way to the left. So now we can have same side reverb. It's to help kind of solidify the position of the guitar in the left-hand channel, or we could go opposite side just to help widen out the guitar. And depending on the mix, if there are two guitars, one panned hard left, one panned hard right, I may opt to utilize same side reverb or same side delay, or opposite side reverb or opposite side delay. All depends on the context of the mix and what I need out of it. Just a cool technique to have in your toolbox. I think I have a video going into greater detail on opposite side reverb and delay. I'll leave a link to that in the description box down below if you're so inclined to check that one out. Another cool effect I really like using, if I bring these back into mono, I'll get rid of that gain, is to actually use some dynamic reverb, which we can't really get out of an amp by itself. And so what I have here is the stock compressor from Logic, and the sidechain right here, I have it set to the guitar, so whatever I'm playing. You can't see that now because I'm not actually recording. I'm not actually sending an audio file through the mixer, but if I was to record, you'll see that when my guitar is playing, there's actually going to be gain reduction applied to the reverb. And then when I stop playing or between phrases or what have you, the compressor is going to slowly disengage and allow that reverb to swell up when the guitar is not as present in the mix. This is a really cool effect I like using on vocals, especially when I need the vocal to be very present and upfront in the mix. We can also utilize it on guitar. So if I hit record, I can adjust that so that it's an even deeper pump. So it makes the reverb a bit more subtle and again, ducks it out of the way whenever the guitar or the dry guitar is up front and actually playing audio. Speaking of dynamics, we can also utilize gated reverb, something that I typically reserve for snare drums or more percussive hits. And in this case, the noise gate is sidechained again to the guitar, so the dry guitar. And what happens here is whenever the guitar signal surpasses a set threshold, it's going to open the gate and allow this reverb output to go through. And then when there's not enough signal being supplied by the guitar, it's actually going to close off. And by itself, this doesn't sound overly inspiring, but when we factor in our time controls right here, the attack, hold, and release, we can make it so that the gate will stay open after a transient opens the gate so that we can get a nice reverb that then shuts off as the gate closes. So again, I'm gonna have to play this in real time. I'll just hit record and we can mess about with these settings here to see what we can get. Let's make it a bit more abrupt. I'll adjust the hold so that when the hold is over, there's no release. It's a cool effect that you can use creatively in your music production endeavors if you would like to. Of course, we have our pumping reverb, which I talked about in a previous video. I'll leave a link to that in the description box down below if you're interested in checking out my video on pumping reverb. This is another one that I have to play in real time, but I have the LFO tool here set to a rate of 1/4, so it's going to sync to this BPM of 120, and then as I record, it's going to pump the amplitude, so it's an amplitude modulation effect, and it's going to be applied to the reverb only. Can make it a bit deeper. And we can even throw on some shimmer if we wanted to, and that is where pitch shifting is combined with reverb. So I'll turn off the LFO effect, turn on this kilohertz pitch shifter, and you see here that I have the mix at 100 and I'm shifting it up 12 semitones, in other words, an octave. And so without the spring reverb, I'm going to have the dry signal right here alongside the pitched up version of that signal, right? Dry. Pitched up. Got to stop playing my strings so hard, throw myself out of tune. And then if we send this pitch shifted version of the signal back through this spring reverb, we will get a shimmer spring reverb that can sound like this. So before I put my guitar away and move into a real session where I'm utilizing advanced spring reverb, if you are enjoying this video thus far, I would encourage you to hit that like button. It really helps out small channels like this in the YouTube algorithm. I greatly appreciate that. All right, here we are inside the mix session for one of my songs called Bottom of the Ocean off my record Fine Dining with an Octopus. See that there's a lot of stuff going on. Hard to do this all with one screen, but I have two guitars right here. Guitar clean 1, guitar clean 2. They are panned to the hard left and hard right respectively. I have the left panned option being sent to bus 16, which is my guitar verb R right here. 1.4 amp spring. In this case, I'm using the Space Designer. This is the stock convolution reverb from Logic. Utilizes impulse responses. Super great plugin, very lightweight in terms of CPU because it was designed for Logic in this case. And then I have this hard right panned guitar being sent to bus 15, which is coming in on verb L. This is the exact same thing, just panned to the left-hand side. If we go to the mixer over here, right here, you see that I have the bus 15 coming in on this track, hard pan left, bus 16, hard pan right. Space Designers, as I discussed over here. Then I have a bit of EQ, just taking out a bit of the low mids here. And then the LFO tool, which we discussed in the previous one. I have this set to a rate of 1/2 note. And you notice up here that the BPM is a whopping 260. Really, it's 130. I just set it up in the session this way and decided to deal with it. And I have the same LFO on the other reverb right here as well. Here's what it sounds like without the spring reverbs. And with. In addition to that, I have some delays. Without the delays. And now in the context of the mix, let's have a listen without these reverbs. And now with. So it's not making a huge difference. It's not like the guitars are way up in your face and playing a major lead role. It's more of a texture thing in the context of this mix. I just wanted to show you how I would go about using this potentially in a mix. There's a whole bunch of other ways, as we discussed in the demo session, to utilize advanced concepts alongside our spring reverbs on our guitars. This is, again, how I use it in this particular mix. So if you'd like more music production techniques like this, especially the more niched ones that people aren't necessarily talking about, I would encourage you to hit that subscribe button and stick around here on the My New Microphone YouTube channel. As always, if you have any questions, thoughts, concerns, or anything to add to the conversation, please do so in the comment section down below. I do my best to reply to everybody who takes the time to comment on my videos. And if you've made it this far in the video, there will be a card in this end screen for another music production video that I think you'll really dig. So click on that one, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.